the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
So today we got together to talk about Graendal, who has a bunch of different names. Later she's Hessalam, after she's killed and resurrected.
Which means without forgiveness?
Without forgiveness. The wolves call her Heartseeker. I thought it was interesting that the wolves have a specific name for her.
Well, I think of that as being a bit of a psychologist. You know, she's really good at the mind and really good at manipulating emotions and people's hearts. So maybe that's where Heartseeker comes from?
Fair enough. I like that. And during the Age of Legend, she was known as, forgive me, Camaril Maridin Nindar.
That's better than I would do. And she's got a third name, which means she had some major accomplishments in the Age of Legends.
Right. She was a renowned psychologist in the Age of Legends for a long time, and it was said that she could cure mental afflictions without the use of the One Power, which was, I guess, really cool at the time.
She's basically a female Freud.
Pretty much.
Sort of a pioneer of psychology and stuff like that, except, effective.
PTSD healer is kind of the vibe I got.
Mm-hmm.
I noted that nobody knows what Graendal means. I couldn't find anything. Sometimes you can find out what the Forsaken names.
Yeah, it doesn't have a specific translation that's ever brought up in the books, but of course, I tie it a little bit to the monster of Graendal.
Yeah, that's what most people say. I couldn't think of anything else.
Oh, I was just reading up on Beowulf stuff, and it was just sort of trying to make a parallel between the monster Graendal and how...
Yeah, Graendal.
How they had a similar sort of transition from the Forsaken, who was this minimalist, purist, no-frills psychologist.
You mean before she was a Forsaken?
Before she was a Forsaken, and how she went through this transition, and how the monsters of Beowulf also were transitioning from what used to be men into these monsters. So it was a weak tie, but I thought it was an interesting theory.
Yeah, it's one of the weaker ones, but, RJ uses these words that I think a lot of people know and kind of bends them a little for his purposes.
Well, it's like all the Trolloc bands that have the names of Banshee and Afreet and all that sort of thing. It doesn't mean that they are those things. It's just legend phases the myth, and the names come to us, and the name Graendal could have come to us down through a legend of this Forsaken.
I like that. Legend fades the myth.
And in the reality, she was a beautiful woman, but in the myth, she's a monster that someone tears the arm off of.
To start, I put down a couple of quotes that I thought kind of summed up Graendal. One is from Samael, when he says, Graendal can prattle along like a fool, but only a true fool takes her for one. What she seemed to let slip among her babbling was often planted as carefully as a kanji needle, which I imagine is like a, what do you call it?
Acupuncture?
Yes.
She's pretty manipulative and smart. She lays plans inside of plans.
Yeah.
And there's some conversations she has that are pretty masterful in a few of the prologues, particularly the Lord of Chaos prologue.
Oh, yeah. That's where that Samael quote is from.
Mm-hmm. I have a reading of that meeting where I think she is doing a couple of things. One, she's pointing Samuel at Rand to try and get him to attack. I think she's also showing off her knowledge about where Demandred is. Because she talks about Shara an awful lot in that meeting, and the land beyond the sea. So I have an interesting reading of that. I'm excited to get to that point because I think she is actually showing off her knowledge that she knows where Demandred is hiding.
Like bragging?
Yeah, totally.
During the Age of Legends, Graendal lived the life of an ascetic. She believed fervently in living a simple and unadorned life, and that anyone who did not do so was morally inferior to her, which I guess is also pretty jerky.
A little bit. I mean, she's a minimalist. She held everyone to super high standards.
The moral high horse thing, I can see why she didn't have many friends. She was also the second to swear her oath to the Dark One, I noted. I thought that was interesting, after Ishmael.
It's pretty early on. And she took Samuel to swear his oaths too, didn't she?
Yeah, I think that took place a good deal later, but it's hard to place this stuff.
Well, a lot of the events in the Age of Legends we don't really get them in relationship to each other in terms of chronological order.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff is references from Lews Therin or the Forsaken talking about it amongst themselves.
And I like your other quote here about Forsaken.
That's her, Graendal talking about the Forsaken, where she says, "Is that what we are? Merely human? Surely we are something more. This is human." And she strokes a finger down the cheek of a woman kneeling beside her. "A new word will have to be created to describe us." In Fires of Heaven prologue.
Which is why they call themselves the Chosen, I think. They want to be something more than human.
They're trying.
They're
doing everything they can, really.
But I think they are just people. They're people with power and people with connections to the Dark One who can be resurrected. But I think she's wrong about that.
Well, yeah, I just think that's a good way to sum up Graendal's personality, where she really does believe that she's not only superior, but not even a part of the humans she looks at as like chattel.
A lot of powerful people can get into that mindset that they think just because they're powerful people, they're not necessarily people anymore, without the same flaws and prejudices, and
power goes to everyone's head.
It really does. The chat room's trying to compare the Forsaken to the rich folks in Altered Carbon.
I still haven't watched that. I told everyone that I would, but I still haven't.
It's a quality show. Definitely good. A lot of interesting ideas about immortality, and
it's sci-fi?
Yeah. You get a little hardware thing in your neck that copies your brain moment to moment. So if you die, they can just pull it out and put it in another body.
Yeah.
And everyone gets them at birth, basically.
It does sound a little Blade Runner-esque.
A little bit. But they're all people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rich people can grow clones of their own body, so they can keep just jumping into another body and live forever.
I mean, are the clones in Blade Runner people?
Well, they're not clones. They're totally made up from scratch.
Oh, well, okay, yeah. What do they call them? Skin jobs.
Yeah, the replicants.
Replicants.
Yeah. Skin job's a bit of a pejorative term.
I liked a lot that the new one threw in a new angle to it where the main character, the cop guy who's a replicant, the replicant cop. Have you seen the new one?
Yes.
Okay. His best friend and lover is an artificial intelligence. And so you get all three layers where there's human beings, replicants, and artificial intelligence, and it I feel like the point is really clear to blur the lines of so what's a human being?
Absolutely.
And if you can give artificial intelligence a human body, then what's the difference?
I'm nodding.
There isn't one. I feel like that's the whole point of the Blade Runner series.
A lot of sci-fi questions what is human, what is life, what is intelligence.
Ghost in the Shell was one of my favorites growing up as a kid. I rented that movie from Blockbuster so many times. Eating frozen pizza and watching anime. I was a cool kid, guys.
And there was definitely some of that going on with the Forsaken in terms of what is a person? If you're reborn,
right? If you can live in the same body for 3,000 to 4,000 years, as some of them have. Graendal's, you could debate about being trapped in the boar and whether that's time lived, but
right.
When she's released from the boar, she's 3,500 years old.
Or just 500 years old.
Something like that.
Yeah. But then they can jump into another body and they remember who they are. They keep their mind and their soul, but they have a different body. And we see that a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also see with rebirth, they lose their mind and keep their soul. So they get a new body and a new mind, but have the same soul.
Let's see. I should probably read the appearance part before we break more into the War of Power.
Sure.
Graendal is described as full-figured and basically almost as pretty as Lanfear, I feel like is the implication a lot of people make. Or, what was the line? I'm not going to read that out loud. I think simply plumply pretty beside Lanfear, someone says at some point.
On her OkCupid profile, she'd select curvy and mean it.
She has curly red gold hair, and that's in opposition to her appearance later as Hessalam, which we referenced already. which means without forgiveness in the old tongue, or the new body they put her in as a punishment, who is an old woman with a hooked nose and pale off-center eyes.
Basically, the most hideous. I think she's described as like just the most hideous woman somebody has ever seen. Like,
it made me wonder where they found her, or if they like found an old woman and disfigured the body and then put Graendal into it.
I imagine they just found the ugliest woman they could, because they kidnap a lot of people for the Thakandar swords, for Trolloc cookpots, and they probably just look through them and pull out the prettiest or the ugliest.
Yeah.
The Dark One has no problem, just like, oh yeah. Or I bet like Moradin's walking around being like, that's a good body.
Yeah, right? Do you think they like assigned one dark friend to that job? Just find the ugliest punishment body.
He puts the rest of the Forsaken in pretty good looking folks. Arengar is hot.
Yeah.
Dean is hot.
But I felt like the Arengar thing even was a kind of a weird head twisty thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Dark One likes to fuck with people. There's no doubt about that. He has a sick, twisted sense of humor.
We could say that.
It's in some ways, it's hard to know who's, the prettiest, because, like, Lanfear's the hottest, Talima's the hottest, Egwene's the hottest. Like, they're all just beautiful women in different ways.
Well, yeah, that's kind of how the real world works. Think of people as, like, you're an amalgam of your attractive traits.
Right. But I do wonder if the Dark One's able to alter people's bodies a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
You think?
You can do all sorts of things in Shale Ghul, especially.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you can remove Patton's Fane's soul and distill it and put it back into him, you could certainly,
So you bring somebody into the boar and maybe
give them
make
off-center eyes.
Give them slightly uglier eyes, or make them shorter. Or... I think they're just picking out pre-existing bodies. I don't think they're altering them.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to back that.
And in terms of the one power, she's actually thought of as extremely powerful.
Yeah, there's a couple of conflicting accounts. I saw a bunch of discrepancies. I even made a special note for that in my notes. Somewhere around as powerful as Nynaeve. Maybe a little more even. Yeah. 2 plus 11, I think she's listed as in the companion, which we all know is iffy at best.
But we think Nynaeve is about equal to Moghedien, who is often considered the weakest of the Forsaken.
Is that right?
I believe so. I believe she's that. So I think most of the other female Forsaken are going to be considered just a little bit stronger than Nynaeve, at least in the beginning. It's possible that Nynaeve continues to get stronger as time goes by.
There's some on this in the Watt Wiki. Surely among the strongest channelers, female channelers ever. Mentions the discrepancies. 3 plus 10 or 2 plus 11, which I barely understand the rating system. I only know it basically by looking at the comparisons of different characters.
Right.
So Watt Wiki says Lanfear, Semerhag, and Masana are maybe more powerful. And a couple of the light channelers. Olivia, obviously, is more powerful than everyone. It says on a level with Nynaeve. But Nynaeve is super powerful. And again, this is all suspect.
And we also know that Graendal has a ring ter'angreal that she carries with her. It's the only plain thing she ever wears. And so it stands out.
Is it a ter'angreal?
Oh, sorry, an angreal.
Oh, doesn't she find that in the series? The gold ring?
It's in Samuel's lair after he dies? That makes sense.
That sounds right. I wanted to know, as we were getting into Graendal during the War of Power and Age of Legends, that she describes her transition to the Shadow as being very painful, and her move away from the light and her ideal moral system as an ascetic. It's also thought that she didn't make the change she didn't make the change in her personality to convert to the Shadow. It was something that was happening before.
I kind of imagine her as a high school kid that's been protected and sheltered his whole life, going off to college for the first time and like really cutting loose and like sort of giving up this puritanical, simplistic version of herself and just going all out in the other direction and just trying to experience absolutely everything. And some of those things she is not prepared for, and it becomes just an incredible, emotionally difficult time when you're making that transition.
I imagine it as a very kind of sad transition where she sort of gives up on the world rather than the Mormon private school girl that goes to a state university. It's like, oh, drugs and alcohol. These are great.
It's a little bit of that, but it's also a little bit of just like everybody's, God, I've been working my ass off for 400 years and everybody still sucks. Fine. I'm going the other direction. I'm done trying to help people and escalate you to my level. I'm going off the deep end. I'm going to experience everything.
I'm nodding. Just literally everything.
Mm-hmm. Including, I'm sure, murder.
Yeah, the next thing I have is that it said that Graendal manages to keep her allegiance to the Shadow hidden for quite a while, leading up to the War of Power. So no one knows that she's sworn to the Shadow until the day she reveals it.
And she's doing things like converting Samuel and a bunch of other stuff behind the scenes, basically being a spy.
Yeah. Inciting riots and suicides, which if we know Graendal, it's, she probably murders them and makes it look like a suicide.
Well, she probably uses compulsion to make them commit suicide.
Oh, well, there you go.
She's really disappointed with people's minds, so she's just crushing them and making them what she wants them to be.
And within 24 hours of her announcement that her allegiance to the Shadow, she releases the first army of Trollocs and seizes the first city in the War of Power for the Shadow. It was a city called Devale.
So she really is the person who starts the War of Power.
She kicks it off.
She kicks it off
herself.
Now, obviously, the Trollocs must have been created by Agenor because he was the one working on those for some time.
Yeah.
But I imagine he's just off in his, Shale Ghoul dungeon basement working on the Trollocs and the Fades and the Golem and all the other various Shadow Spawn. And Graendal's like arranging.
They're working together.
How that's going to happen.
That one's in, I believe it's called The World of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time or something like that.
Okay.
It was like an early version of the companion, basically. I also really liked that as an example of Graendal's personality because it shows her using her skills in manipulation and subterfuge rather than using outright military tactics in the way that like Demandred might.
She's not a general.
No.
But she's a manipulator.
She's more like a master spy.
I think a lot of the success of the dark side is due to her ability to plan and manipulate and put all the pieces in order. I think especially when Ishamael is dead, between books like and before Moradin comes back, she sort of arranges that alliance between herself, Lanfear, Samuel, and Bilal.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's Bilal.
And sort of gets that whole alliance going. And
isn't there like a creepy scene where he propositions her or something like that? Oh, Halima. As Halima.
Oh, Halima. Oh, yes, of course. That's Bethamal.
I don't think Bilal would have much luck propositioning anyone.
Well, and it's also an interesting... Halima's sort of the first transgender character, but not really, because it's not like she,
the literal transgender where their soul is put into a new body.
And sort
but
of that,
unwillingly also.
Right. But then they sort of change to adapt to their body, which I feel like is a little bit... The idea that she is... that just because he's in a new body, he's not a guy anymore. And he still channels Sidene, but sort of the soul of a man in the body of a woman. And he just sort of forgets what it's like to be a man and sort of fully embraces being a woman, even though it wasn't his choice.
There is a kind of, an interesting dynamic, an interesting thing happening there.
I think part of the reason he was put in a female body is sort of because he was such a lecher as a dude and someone who would kind of
turn it around.
Yeah, just turn it around and put him in the kind of body that he would be interested in as a dude.
Yeah, that's how we find out that the type of power that you channel is connected to your soul. So it doesn't matter the body you're in.
Not to the body.
And that your soul is gendered.
Well, pretty much everything in this book is gendered with people.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't... And I think that's one of the things that people get up in arms about is the idea that there can be a female dragon in other ages. Like, but if the dragon... Well, because if the dragon's always Graendal Thor and your soul is gendered, how would there be a female dragon?
Oh, I just mean, why can't there be 2 or more?
Right.
Why can't there be 100 in an infinite turnings of the wheel? You know, the Dark One does this with other characters, and when I say does this, I mean when he reincarnates people, he's a couple of times, but sometimes he changes people's bodies in a way to like make a joke almost. Yeah. It's like a dark joke. Of course it is, coming from the Dark One. But I think that's what is all that's going on there. Kind of like what Seth was saying, that he was so creepy, womanizing, lecherous, that it seemed appropriate to the Dark One to give him the body of a young woman.
And like Lanfear was proud of being tall, so she got put in a short body. Graendal was proud of being beautiful, so she got put in an ugly body.
Yeah. He was like cool with Moradin, so he just gave him like a younger, nicer looking body. Is that what happened there?
Basically.
I always thought of Moradin as like a good looking guy.
Yeah, he served well, so he just got a new quality body.
Just a fresh one.
Yeah. He wasn't being punished at all.
Yeah. I can't remember what Asengar looks like.
He's just...
Let's see if I can find a picture really quick.
A pretty normal looking guy. I think he's a Borderlander? I want to say blue eyes.
The WoW Wiki says Asengar is Agenor. I remember being really confused in my first couple of read-throughs about who those people were.
Dashiva is Agenor, is Asengar. And then Bethalmel is Arengar, is Halima.
Yes.
Okay, I think we've got it.
Sorry. It's tough to keep track of. Let's move on to the Third Age. After Graendal escapes the boar, shortly afterward, she hides herself in Eridoman under the guise of the ailing Lady Bassine.
And so she just takes over an existing estate
of a
rich woman and then compels everybody to think that she is that woman.
Rich Damani lady.
Yeah. Anyone who comes by sees her as just this doting old lady.
Graendal is there at one of the early meetings in the Fires of Heaven between the Forsaken, where Raven, Lanfear, and Samael are there. And Lanfear proposes that they work together to try to control Rand. I guess eventually turn him to the Shadow.
That alliance I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that meeting in Caemlyn, in the Royal Palace, happens after the death of Asmodean in the books.
Oh, I have this slightly out of order then.
Well, no, you're right. So what happens is Asmodean dies at the end of, or is it the Fires of Heaven? And so that meeting in Caemlyn leads directly to the murder of Asmodean.
Because Asmodean's in the palace.
And so he sees her, and I think she kills him in a panic.
Yeah, I saw that that's what's assumed. I guess we'll never know exactly why she did it. But it's left unknown for a really long time who killed, because it's from Asmodean's perspective, I think. And he's just, I forget what the line is, but
it's you. No. Yeah. And then what happens is then in the prologue of the next book, you see Graendal's meeting that actually took place before Asmodean's death.
Oh, okay.
And so I think that's why
she's there.
So the timeline gets a little messed up because the meeting does take place, even though in the books it takes place after his death. It actually occurs before.
Gotcha. Yeah, I never realized how much timeline stuff there was until we started doing this podcast. Like with Rand's channeling sickness, the confused chapters in Eye of the World, and
then there's a lot of overlap after the cleansing of the source too, where there's a lot of like going back to other characters.
we have the chapter we just did of the Great Hunt, where you have Rand uses the portal stone and it's 4 months later, and we see like a bit of that perspective. And then the next chapter is Egwene before, so it starts like or somewhere around the time that Rand is in a different universe or whatever.
Yeah.
It picks up and Egwene is from Egwene's perspective.
But we see Rand 4 months later, and then we jump back to Egwene, and we get to see
A little bit
some
before
time
that.
passing. Yeah.
And we see the whole thing with Leandrin, but
So that's just what authors have to do when they're telling a story, is they tell one timeline up to a certain point, and they jump back and tell another.
yeah, unless it's all from a single perspective. So she, at that point, continues her past alliance with Samael, and we see the evidence that she's been to Shara when she shows him the Shiboan and Shibote that she captured from Shara, which are like king and queen, I think.
They're the important people.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes me think she is working with Demandred, and he is in Shara at that point, and she knows it. Because I think she went with him and then kidnapped these two.
And she hints at it in this scene.
She does.
Yeah, the
Which I really like.
rulers of Shara are killed after a 7-year reign.
Yeah, it's like they call it a divine will, but there's actually a whole like process in place. Like the priests end up killing them and stuff.
Yeah, the actual people in power, which
Right.
are the channelers.
So she goes ahead and steals them. And what I assume is going on is Demandred's over there starting his reign of power at that point. And so there's a whole bunch of references to Shara right after Samuel asks where Demandred is. Graendal's like, I don't know.
But check this out.
Reading that in hindsight, I found it, not obvious, but kind of blatant.
I think her intent is to manipulate Samael in those scenes. I mean, her intent's like always to manipulate.
Sure.
And that's also the scene where she's trying to aim Samael at Rand to kill him, which would be against the directive of the Dark One. This way she can destroy her ally one way or another. Either Rand will do it or the Dark One will.
Because at that point, I think she's lost the other two folks. I mean, Ravine's dead. Lanfear's gone through the portal with Moraine. So she's running out of allies.
She's just got to use this last one well.
Yeah, that big alliance has gone down to just her and Samuel, and he's not all that useful.
And by use this last one, I mean get him knocked off so that she could be Nabliss. Because that's also right after in Lord of Chaos, where the Dark One kind of hints that she might be able to do that.
So, and Samuel does that odd thing where he sends a messenger to Rand, and Rand says no truce. The messenger dies horribly, and then Samuel claims he has a truce to Graendal. And I was a little confused by that scene. Is he just lying to her to try and convince her that he has a truce with Rand? Or is that something
To kind of
that he makes a mistake and just doesn't understand what Rand actually tells him?
I've never really understood exactly what was going on there. My thoughts right now are that that's Samael trying to set him up in a position of power in Graendal's mind to kind of ensure an alliance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Samael thinks that he can outmaneuver Graendal, so he needs her on his side. And they historically have been allies.
Right. So he's lying about his alliance with Rand, basically to say, yeah, listen, I don't have to worry about it.
You probably want to be on my side.
Yeah. But in reality, he's got nothing of the sort.
Right. He just outright lies to her.
Mm-hmm.
But they do work together after that, creating chaos using the Shido Wise Ones with all the callbox stuff.
Which the call boxes don't actually do anything. They're useless pieces of junk.
Right.
It's when they're pressing the buttons, Samuel just weaves gateways and ties them off.
Yeah.
And because he's just like in the bushes watching. And then when they go through them,
Do they actually call them idiot boxes?
yeah,
in the series?
in the old tongue, that's the word for the boxes means idiot box. And Graendal looks at him like, that was a little risky to call them idiot boxes. What if one of these folks know the old tongue?
And this is, in essence, Samuel and Graendal's plan to scatter the Shido tribe across the continent in an effort to please the Great Lord in creating chaos. I also noticed at the end of that, it's A Crown of Swords, chapter 20. Graendal notices, and Samuel doesn't, that all the channelers are in one group.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't tell him. I also wondered what her intent was there.
I just think she was keeping that little bit of information to herself. He's trying to scatter folks, the evil Aiel, and so it's a way to undermine Rand by having them
undermine the name of the Aiel
exactly.
in the eyes of Randlanders,
which then undermines Rand himself.
Yeah,
and just by spreading them all over the place,
since they're his best tool.
What ends up happening to that group of Shido channelers?
What ends up happening to Savannah's group?
Yeah.
After they're separated, that's the group that has the huge battle with Perrin.
Okay, and he just mows them down, basically.
I can't even remember what happens to Savannah. Shanchan? I want to say Shanchan happens to Savannah.
Yeah, so I guess most of the wise ones get taken Domine.
The Shido wise ones.
The Shido wise ones.
Yeah.
And then if you go back, that's right, because Galena it gets taken as a pet for Therva. Therava, and they end up going back to the Waste, and she's like, basically gives up. And I'm assuming that when they head back into the Waste, they pretty much fade into irrelevance in the way that the Aiel do during Avienda's vision. When the Aiel fade, I imagine that's pretty much what happens to the Shido. So the next time we see her is by basically impersonating King Hessalam.
Back in Aradoman.
Mm-hmm.
She sends that letter to Rodel Ideralda, signed as from the king with more misleading orders, or more let the Lord of Chaos rule orders.
Yeah, just basically having him attack one group and then turn around and go back and attack another group. And
make really bad decisions so that his war with the Dragonsworn goes badly. Mm-hmm. She's an expert at this chaos thing.
Totally. No, she definitely keeps a lot of the wars going and a lot of the battles ongoing. Yeah, and fortunately, Ideralda is able to sort of take the orders that he wants and ignore the orders that he doesn't. Like, he does this thing where, like, I think finally he gets one order that he likes, and he like, oh, I didn't hear the other ones, and
yeah, I always liked his plot lines a lot.
But it's just another example of Graendal. Instead of doing direct confrontation, she's able to manipulate the people around her into doing what she wants and accomplishing what she wants.
She's a master.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after Samael's death, in the battle for Ilion, Sindain and Moghedien are sent as messengers to Graendal to tell her that Moradin has been made Bliss and to come kneel. She refuses at first until Shaidar Haran shows up and says that it's true.
Well, isn't she like wondering who the hell Sindain is?
Oh, Sindain?
Sindain. She shows up and she looks at Sindain and is like, who's this yellow-haired shit? There's this young girl who's like acting all arrogant and stuff, and I think she eventually figures out it's Lanfear, but at least in the beginning she's like, who is this arrogant third ager who talks to me like they're one of the Forsaken? How dare they? Yeah. She also doesn't know who Moradin is. He's just this like random blue-eyed third age person. She doesn't realize he's Ishmael reborn right away, so she's sort of resistant to the whole like, how the hell is this random dude Nabliss?
Yeah, she hates that idea,
mm-hmm.
Of course, until Shaidar Haran shows up and tells her to do it.
Yeah, well...
You don't really have a choice.
You don't mess with Shaidar Haran. Is that the first time we meet Shaidar Haran?
It's definitely one of the early times, because that is, I think, also in The Path of Daggers.
Because what is it? When you obey Shadow Haran, you obey me. When you disobey Shadow Haran, the rest did not need to be said. I think that's a quote for Demandred.
Yeah, I think Demandred is the first person to meet him when he goes to Shale Ghul, and the cave like warps and scrapes his head, but not Shaidar Haran's, even though he's taller.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. So this is probably the second time he shows up. It's like, so because we already know who he is, and we know he's connected to the Dark One. We basically know he is the Dark One when he shows up for Graendal because of the scene with Demandred.
Yeah, I don't think Shadowhuron speaks in that scene. Doesn't say anything.
No, because the Dark One's talking.
Oh, so I guess he does speak in a way.
It's interesting. In Shale Ghul, I don't know that the Shadowhuron ever speaks in Shale Ghul. I think it's just the Dark One. The big all caps voice.
But that's when Moradin gathers a lot of the Chosen together after hearing Lanfear's report on Rand about to cleanse Sidin, or Sidene. He orders them to find Rand, disrupt the process, and even kill Rand if necessary, which he later rescinds that order.
Well, once the source is cleansed, right?
Once the source is cleansed, yeah.
But he's willing to kill Rand, which will probably at that point also kill him in order to stop
him from cleansing Sidene.
Because that's a major victory for the Light.
Yeah.
That might be one of their only major victories at that point, other than the killing of some of the Forsaken.
More or less, because up until that point, Rand is doing the uniting Arthur Hawkwing type deal, uniting the nations, and often is not going to war with various nations to get them to unite against the Shadow.
Well, and the Lord of Chaos is ruling. There's all sorts of death and destruction, and Rand is basically being pushed deeper into madness. So the Dark One is succeeding.
Yeah, Vino's right here. The cleansing Sidene is really the tipping point where things start going well for the forces of the Light. With random assassination missions against the Forsaken peppered in there, essentially.
Right. Whenever they threaten him, or if they go after his girlfriend's mother.
Yeah, Rand is a really dynamic character. He goes through a lot of changes.
He has several distinct phases of personality.
The other characters don't as much. I feel like Perrin's almost Perrin through the whole series, which speaks to his character, and it makes sense. Not that he's not interesting. But...
Well, he changes early.
Okay,
In Eye of the World. Like he goes from blacksmith to wolf brother very, very quickly. Nynaeve has huge changes. She goes from this angry, bitter person. Mat, I would say, has like 3 distinct phases.
Sure. Well, I'm not saying that the other characters aren't dynamic, but Rand is the most pronounced.
Yeah, Matt's pre and post dagger, but I feel like pre dagger he gets a couple of different personalities too, because there's like paranoid Matt before the healing, and then sort of just dying Matt after the healing, and then there's like the big healing. So when I say the healing, I mean just the one in Faldara.
Yeah, Gwyn just gets tempered slowly. I don't feel like there's distinct Egwenes. She's a Gwyn through the whole thing. She just gets...
She matures.
Well, yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, she just tempers slowly until she's metal at the end.
Mm-hmm. The uncertainty is pounded out of her.
Yeah.
All right, well, back to Graendal.
Yeah, bringing it back around. So Graendal travels to Shadar Logoth with Moradin's chosen group to help stop Rand from cleansing Sidene. But she's attacked by Varen, who's in a small circle with Kumira, who I don't remember, to be honest, and Shallan Din Togara Morningtide, who I vaguely remember.
So is that one of the kin and one of the sea folk?
I believe so. I mean, definitely one of the sea folk with that name. Morningtide. Kumira's killed in that battle, and Graendal retreats.
Let me look up Kumira. Aes Sedai of the Brown Ajah.
It is interesting that Varen is there repelling Graendal. She's kind of the reason that Graendal has to retreat from the battle at Shadar Logoth. She's controlling that circle, right? I'm pretty sure Varen's controlling the circle.
So I guess they have to obey the commands of those set above them, but if they're not commanded to do anything, they could still attack them and kill them?
Sure. I mean, the Forsaken do it all the time.
Right. I feel like the Dark One encourages competition between his Forsaken and folks, so he would never create a rule that would prevent you from like attacking or killing somebody.
A bit like the Empress, may she live forever.
Just imagining the Forsaken yelling, "Don't kill me," every time they encounter a Black Ajah. But yeah, I feel like if you're black, you can kill anyone if you can justify it. If you can't justify it, you might be punished.
Right. So only the strongest survive. After that, the next time we see her is attending a meeting of the Chosen in the World of Dreams, which Moradin makes to look like the Anceline Gardens, a reference we see once or twice.
And she's not hurt trying to stop the cleansing.
No, but she's just forced to retreat. She kills Chimera, but is forced to retreat after that.
And that's generally considered a failure by the Dark One.
Is it Masana that gets the order and doesn't show up?
Yes.
We definitely talked about that in the Masana episode. And this meeting in the World of Dreams is where Moradin rescinds the kill Rand order. So just for this short time, there's a death warrant out for Rand.
Just to stop the cleansing. Once the cleansing is accomplished, he doesn't want him killed anymore.
I'm nodding.
It's too late.
Yeah. Also where he puts out a warrant on Natrin and Perrin's lives.
And that really does seem to be her next big task after the stopping of the cleansing, is she seems to be commanded to, especially Perrin, more so than...
Well, she offers to kill Perrin.
Matt.
But after Natrin's Barrow, she hides on a desolate island in the Aryth Ocean. And Moradin goes and finds her.
So let's talk a little bit about Natrin's Barrow.
Graendal, as the Lady of Natrin's Barrow, has Arengar and Dallana with her in this scene. And this is where Rand goes full Darth Rand.
And Dallana and Arengar have fled the rebel camp because they were about to be discovered.
That's right.
And so they fled there and found themselves
serving Graendal.
And so Rand sends this courier up Ramshalon.
He's there with Nynaeve and a couple of people, and he sends a messenger, essentially. I think basically to see if anything happens to Ramshalon when he returns. Oh. So his proof, like Rand's proof, is that when Ramshalon serving Rand as an emissary arrives, Graendal orders Dallana and Arengar to place compulsion on him and send him back to Rand. Mm-hmm. She watches Ramshalon make his way back to Rand and Nynaeve through a special weave. We've talked about this before, the True Power Weave. One of the things that Saidin and Saidar can't do. She watches through the eyes of a dove.
She's basically using the Dark One's spies to watch. And so when this courier comes back, Rand has him checked for compulsion.
Right.
And uses that compulsion as a measure to whether or not he kills Graendal. Because what he wants to do is balefire her back before the point when she would have created that. And so that's his check to make sure that she's actually dead. And so he didn't send the courier there to negotiate or anything. He just sent them there as basically a barometer of her death.
So with the True Power Weave, looking through the eyes of a dove, Graendal realizes what's happening and that Ramshalon is like a type of bait. Mm-hmm. And she shields Dallana and Arengar and makes a gateway and scrams. This way, when everything's balefired, the compulsion weave is gone from Ramshalon, and Rand totally buys it. He thinks that he just killed Graendal.
Absolutely. His only mistake is not realizing that someone else could have put the compulsion on there.
Yeah.
And it is lucky for Graendal that she doesn't actually set the compulsion herself.
So what it actually indicates is that Dallana and or Arengar just died. And we know Arengar definitely died. I assume Dallana too.
Oh yeah, she was
There's no way out of that.
Right. So they were both balefired into nothingness.
And that's when she retreats to a desolate island in the Aryth Ocean and is found by Moradin. And he chastises her for her failure and for causing the death of another chosen.
But she manages to spin it into an advantage. She's like, well, I've convinced them that I'm dead, and that gives me a huge advantage. It lets me... And he's like, well, you get one chance. You can hunt down Perrin.
Yeah. And she promises that she'll kill Perrin. Mm-hmm. Moradin agrees to allow her to attempt it, and he loans her the Dream Spike and Slayer. 2 excellent tools to do the job. Of course,
that fails to work because of a lot of Taviran stuff and Perrin being a badass.
And Perrin's totally awesome at this point.
Right. And so the whole battle between Slayer and Perrin using the Dream Spike and Perrin, shifting it, he shifts it right into the White Tower.
Right. We were talking about this a little before we started recording the episode, but I was excited to hear you get into it a little. So a lot happens here with the Dream Spike. That's really important to the battle for Tar Valon, and not just the Perrin's battle for his own life.
we essentially had these two battles going on simultaneously. The battle of Perrin and the Dream Spike that happens in the dream world.
Perrin Slayer, Dream Spike.
Yeah.
Wolves.
And then Masana and Egwene are going at it in the dream world.
Yeah.
And the goal for Masana was to lure Egwene into the dream world and then lure her into a more advantageous place where they had traps set up and then they could just take her down.
I'm nodding.
And because Perrin brings the Dream Spike in and does his badass, it's just a weave, and swats away some balefire, that whole situation in the tower goes south for the dark and causes Masima to die.
More or less. But Egwene breaks her mind. Right?
Yeah, I mean, she's no longer
a vegetable.
She's a vegetable,
for lack of a better term.
And he can't even put her in a new body because her mind is broken, and she'd still be a vegetable. You know, I've talked about this a couple of times where you have mind, body, soul, and it seems like
the
Dark One can move a mind and a soul into a new body, but there's no
destroy one of them.
Yeah, if you destroy the mind, there's not going to be any point.
Right.
Not to mention he's locked away pretty quickly after that.
Who's locked away?
The Dark One in the last battle.
Right.
So he can't do anything after the last battle.
This is a huge plot point in the last battle sequence or chapter. The last battle is one chapter, right? Isn't it like 1 300-page chapter or something like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the chapter of the last battle is one chapter. I think the last battle starts long before that chapter, and I think goes a little bit after it.
Oh, I guess so.
But that is like the big battle. Oh, and I like how, Masana has a room hidden in the White Tower. That's how she's able to hide a lot of what she does, is she has a hidden room and a hidden space.
That is cool.
I always like that.
I forgot about that.
So the Dark One now blames Graendal for the death of at least 2 and probably 3 Forsaken.
Arengar, Asmodean, and Masana.
So Masana through the Dream Spike, Arengar because of the balefire compulsion thing, and Asmodean, well, I guess there's some question as to whether or not he was killed under the Dark One's orders, or if he was killed by Graendal just to prevent him from revealing her presence.
Isn't that how we know, where Shadar Haran shows up to punish her, and he blames her for the death of 3 Forsaken? He mentions Masana, but not the other 2. We know that she killed Arengar, and that's how we deduce that she also killed Asmodean. Well, I guess, but the only reason I'm bringing that up is that I think the Dark One wasn't pleased with Asmodean's death.
Oh, no, you think he wasn't pleased with his death?
Yeah.
I think he was.
Oh, really?
Well, because he says he betrayed me, basically. He was a traitor. He probably couldn't have resurrected him simply because I'm assuming Graendal balefired him.
Balefires him? I don't know that we know.
We don't know for sure.
He can't defend himself no matter what
but there's
happened.
Nothing left of him. So I think either he died the final death because the Dark One just refuses to resurrect him, or he died the final death because he was balefired.
Yeah.
It's not clear whether it was because he is a traitor.
That also seems false to me, that Asmodean was a traitor because he was unwillingly a traitor.
Well, yeah, but the Dark One doesn't know that. Lanfear lied. Lanfear went back to the Dark One and was like, Asmodean, he went over.
Oh.
Basically forced him to be Rand's tutor.
I tried to talk to him, but he's unreasonable.
I don't know. He's clearly hanging out with the dragon. I think he was balefired. So I don't think the Dark One could resurrect him even if he wanted to.
And like you said, if he could, he probably wouldn't.
Exactly. So she's killed for her failures.
Presumably Shadar Haran kills her, and the Dark One resurrects her and names her Hessalam, which means last chance, because this was her killing Perrin. Her mission to kill Perrin was meant to be how she redeemed herself from punishment, and she fails.
And so she's punished and given just the ugliest body they can come up with.
The body of Hessalam, which is an old hunchbacked woman with like a bald spot and a nose that's described as hooked and bulbous. Oh, and I think covered in warts as well. She's
kind of reminds me of like an evil witch, right? Like that, the stereotypical, like if
milky
you put
eyes that are off center,
right,
I think is the description.
So you like put a witch hat on her and throw on a broom and she'd
Oh, Sindane means last chance? Oh.
Yeah, Hessalam means
Hessalam's without forgiveness.
Without forgiveness.
That's right.
Yeah. So essentially, she is in the doghouse forever.
Thank you, Septon.
Yeah, she's a hag.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in that guise, she is manipulating the great captains. That's sort of her next plan to win the last battle.
That's right, which is still a highly effective maneuver. I mean, until it's discovered. And then, of course, full generalship is given to Matt Coffin, which is a stroke for the light.
But she's very effective. It's a big blow to the light early on in the battle to have the generals basically fail. And then losing the generals is a big blow against the light, which turns out to be actually a good thing for the light because they get Matt instead.
And Perrin sees Hessalam doing it in the World of Dreams.
That's right. He sees her going into whose dreams? Is it a couple of the different generals?
That's when he's in Tel Aren Riyadh physically.
Right. He sees Graendal affecting Bashir and Ituralda. He warns somebody, doesn't he? He gets the word out. And I think he manages to stop Ituralda.
He sends Elias.
That's right, because he's able to contact Elias in the Wolf Dream. And then Elias gets to Ituralda, and Elias takes him down.
Physically?
Yeah, physically takes him down. And then I think, because Lan sees the betrayal.
Yeah,
as well.
Lan suspects, but I think it's confirmed by Perrin and Elias. And Hessalam sees Perrin as well. They see each other. I think he watches her for a little while, and she sees him and lashes out in anger. But
he's so good in the Wolf Dream, he's able to survive that. We totally skipped the whole setup with the whole White Cloak army that she set up and the trap. Wasn't that her for Perrin?
Oh,
yeah. So
where did I miss that? Which book was that in?
That was...
Or approximately. So
that was about the same time as the Dream Spike. That was the same time as the Dream Spike.
When she gets the Dream Spike?
Yeah. So there's the whole thing where she is setting up that trap, and she doesn't want them to be able to escape with the Dream Spike.
What trap?
This is the trap for Perrin.
Yeah.
And there is, I believe, a bunch... They're going to portal stone in a bunch of Trollocs.
Uh-huh.
This is the scene where they're portal stoning in. And she's hoping to catch him in the middle of his fight with the White Cloaks. And she sort of waits for the White Cloaks to go away, and then realizes she can't trap Perrin, so they're about to attack the White Cloaks. And then Perrin steps up and rescues them from the attack from the Trollocs. And a bunch of the White Cloaks get wiped out anyway, and he takes the remnants. But that whole trap...
Is this the scene with Galad?
Yeah. And there's some clues that she may have been compelling Bayar to help convince the White Cloaks. Bayar is fanatic against Perrin, and Bayar tries to stab him. And there's some evidence that wasn't just him being a crazy White Cloak, but that was actually compulsion by Graendal to kill Perrin.
Oh, interesting. I never knew about that theory, that Bayar is compelled by Graendal to go after Perrin. It would make sense, but since her goal at the time is to kill Perrin.
And she talks about having a secret weapon. And I thought that was just the Dream Spike and Slayer, but I think it may also be just a little bit of Bayar compulsion.
I always assumed it was one of the two. And yeah, that's during the whole trial. I loved that part.
Oh, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of different layers to it. Very skillfully put together, I think.
Yeah. Way to go, Sanderson.
But, and then, of course, Bornhald stabs Bayar to prevent him from killing Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
So he, the Bornhalds do redeem themselves a little bit as far as White Cloaks go. They're some of the better White Cloaks, even if they do...
Oh, totally. We've talked about that.
Even if being White Cloaks, they do suck.
The best of the worst.
Yeah.
As far as White Cloaks go, they're real great guys.
But yeah, so that whole thing is part of the trap she sets with the Dream Spike and Slayer.
Gotcha. I totally missed that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a male channeler is popping Trollocs in and out. Is that?
That's right. Oh. Using the Portal Stone.
Yeah, using the Portal Stone. And so that's how she sets him up. Do we ever figure out who that male channeler is?
I don't think by name.
Yeah.
He's killed by one of the Ashaman, one of Perrin's Ashaman. Grady, thank you, as usual, Aradia.
Right.
How do you do this?
But we assume he's one of the like new Dreadlords, which I think of as the turned Dark Ashaman, and the Black. So I think of the Dreadlords as the Dark Ashaman and the Black Hotjaw.
Right.
You know, once Egwene purges the White Tower, the Black Hotjaw becomes the new Dreadlords.
Yeah.
It could be a converted Aiel, but I feel like it's more likely to be an Ashaman.
Probably.
So the final scene of Graendal fighting in the last battle.
Yeah, and finally Hessalam goes to the Shale Ghul, to the battle there, where she ends up running into first to Ruark. And does her mind-breaking compulsion thing to turn him into an automaton.
She kills Ruark. It's one of the sadder deaths, I think, because she sends Ruark after Aviendha, and Aviendha kills him to protect herself.
Yeah, and then Aviendha, Amis, and Cadsuane confront her, and a handful of other women. But
yeah, Amis must just lost her husband.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, such a great fight. That's one of I think, a really good one power circle, just example of how strategy and the one power work really well together. And I love the Aiel hunting Graendal and the way that feels.
And yeah, Aviendha, was Amis a Fardaris Mai?
Yes.
And Cadsuane's even worse than that.
So they go after her, and there's you've got it here in your notes, I think.
Aviendha throws spears made out of light.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool little weave.
Graendal uses the true power to try and escape, right?
I believe so, but Graendal can only channel a small bit of it.
Right, but that's that whole thing. Aviendha stabs her in the side with the spear, and when Graendal uses the true power to fold herself into somewhere else, Aviendha goes with her. As
Aviendha hits her in the side, Hessalam makes a true power weave that transports both her and Aviendha.
Mm-hmm. So that's that. We see that all the time where they instead of creating a gateway, they fold into themselves.
Yeah.
And Aviendha gets carried along with her.
And totally exhausted, she manages to shield Aviendha, but not before Aviendha ties off a gateway as a signal to Amis and Cadsuane so that they can find her.
And then Graendal shields her. And so they're both basically lying there exhausted, and
Graendal prepares compulsion
Yeah.
to attack Aviendha's mind
And
while Aviendha's pulling apart a gateway.
And so Aviendha can see that compulsion coming, and she's like, well, I'm just going to see if I can recreate that explosion that happened when Elaine pulled apart a gateway.
Take us both out.
It'll kill us both, but at least it'll be worth it to kill her. And so, we see often that the effect of picking apart a gateway is unpredictable and seems to always benefit the side of the light. They should really pick gateways apart more often, because one time they did it, they destroyed the Shan-Chan and held off their attack for months. And the other time they do it, we get this nice effect where the compulsion bounces off of it and ends up back on Graendal.
Right. So all in a single moment, Graendal's reaching out with compulsion. Aviendha pulls the thread on the gateway that causes it to explode, and this causes the compulsion to backfire on Graendal with all these weaves of the power flying through the air is the way I visualize it.
Yeah, I mean, we just know that picking apart a gateway has, it's a really powerful, complicated weave, and when you start pulling it apart, it can have all sorts of unintended effects. And in this case, it destroys Graendal's mind, or Hessalam's mind.
The broken threads of the gateway interfere with the weaves of Graendal's compulsion, and it's placed on her own mind.
And so then Aviendha basically tells her, carry me back to camp. And that's the last time we see her.
And she does.
So she's not really a vegetable, but she's not really a person anymore.
I imagine it's the weave that Graendal uses on her pets. So it's not that, how do I say this? They're like robotic. They worship.
They're
Graendal.
automatons.
Will
Because
do whatever she wants.
they don't have their own mind anymore. When you remove the compulsion weave, there's nothing left.
Right.
All that's there is the compulsion.
It's the husk and enough intelligence to walk and talk and respond to orders, but that's all.
Pretty much. And she did that to herself. So there's nothing there.
Thanks, Avienda.
Way to go. I wonder if they tap her for information, because she would surely be able to like continue to be a teacher, and I'm sure they could get like information out of her.
Maybe. It depends on the weave of compulsion. She might not have anything left.
Mm-hmm. But the other effect of that explosion, of course, was it just tore Avienda's feet apart.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Was that the explosion of the gateway, or did that happen before the gateway?
The explosion of the gateway, because before that, it's earlier?
Yeah, her feet got shredded earlier. That was like Hessalam explodes the ground, and Avienda jumps up and is able to jump over a good amount of the explosion, but it still shreds her. It's like an exploding rock. It still shreds her feet.
Isn't she's healed though, right? Or are her feet off, or are they
There's
just
not
mangled?
enough left to really. She'll never walk normally again.
Oh,
Even though she's healed.
well, she'll be an honored wise one.
I can't imagine that's going to stop her.
Nah.
I could see Avienda like becoming a major horse rider. That would be ironic. If to make up for the loss of her feet, she like started riding horses everywhere.
Especially after hating it for all that time.
Exactly. All right, well, that's Graendal. Sort of from start to finish. She's a master manipulator and definitely behind a lot of the significant events that happen in the series and a lot of the effective tactics of the dark side.
Yeah, you haven't flown in a while.
No, it's been a really long time. And I was like reading all the regulations and I was like, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, but what are you going to do? Take a train?
I wish.
Yeah, me too. If I had the time, I totally would. I have to take off my shoes. I was pissed when that first happened too.
Well, and I'm getting these emails like, make sure your bag's small enough or we'll charge you. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah, I get it, but my personal convenience trumps that.
I miss the days when I could go up to the gate and wait for people and hug them as they came off the plane. I miss the days when airports were a place of people watching and fun and relaxation. They're now a place of stress and...
Drug dogs and assault rifles.
Yeah. So I feel like I remember the days when airports were pleasant places, and when I would like go up into the cabin as a kid and they'd give me wings and I could sit in the pilot seat. Like, that was awesome.
That's totally why I took a Amtrak down to San Diego when I was doing the PCT, just to not have to deal with it. And
Yep.
Plus, it takes like a day and a half or something, but, you know, there's a bar on the train. It's kind of cool. It's not like a great bar or anything.
I definitely used to take the train home from college. It was like, you know, a day ride, but way better than taking the...
It's nice. I like
plane.
trains.
Yeah. Especially when they have a bar. Anything that has a bar on it is okay with me, let's be honest.
And you're allowed to bring like whatever the fuck you want onto a train. You can just... I brought a bottle of wine and like some sandwiches. It was good.
We should bring some booze with us on the flight, though. Oh, you can't bring liquids.
Nope.
Jesus.
You can buy stuff in the air, like after you go through security, you can buy stuff and bring that on the plane. That
Yeah.
I usually do. And I usually get pretty drunk before I get on a plane. Although I'm not sure how long this flight's going to be. Usually when I get on a plane, it's a 6-hour flight.
This is going to be a big one because this is across the country.
But aren't we stopping in
Denver.
Denver?
Yeah, we got
that's
one.
That's not a long flight, really.
No.
So I probably won't get too drunk.
Can you get like 10 100 milliliter bottles? Like, is that something you can do?
I also usually buy food in the airport.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do for flights that are long enough. Well, I mean, you have to pay. You have to buy the food, and it's shitty. Like, it's not,
It's airplane food. You know, airplane food tastes bad because you're in the air.
Really?
And, like, they've done, I forget if it's the vibration or the noise or the pressure, but it's something like it totally changes your taste buds. And so, like, they have to way over salt everything because that's the only way you'll ever taste anything in the air.
Huh.
It's pretty interesting. It's not always their fault that the airplane food sucks.
Well,
but it does suck.
I don't really blame them.
Yeah.
I just get a couple of slices after security and bring them with me or something. Or get drunk and sleep the whole way.
Yeah. No,
that's my strategy for visiting my mom. Wake up in Newark.
I just read. I use the time to polish off a few books.
I get bored, Nancy. I can't sit for 6 hours.
Well, like I said, with the stop off, hopefully we won't be. It'll be 2 sort of short hops.
Mm-hmm. Never been to Atlanta. Been close to Atlanta.
Yeah, I've never been there either. It'll be interesting to check out the new city. I love going to new cities.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?